In this video, we're going over what you need to do for a 100,000 mile service on this first generation Chevy Silverado. Now this 100,000 mile service that we do on this vehicle, you can do it every 100,000 miles at 200,000, 300,000, and so on. The first thing you want to do is replace these spark plugs. Now they're located on both sides of the engine, right above the exhaust manifolds right there, or next to the exhaust manifolds. And you have the spark plug wires as well. Now, per the manual, it says to check the wires, but in my experience, whenever you're pulling the wires off, a lot of times they break. So I recommend getting new wires while you're doing the plugs. Let's talk about transmission fluid. The dipstick is located right here, and this is where you're gonna check your fluid level with the dipstick, and that's where you're gonna actually add the fluid. So at 50,000 miles, you wanna drain the fluid and add new transmission fluid. At 100,000 miles, you want to drop the transmission pan, replace the filter, and add new fluid. You want to check the coolant level. The reservoir is right here. Now, the coolant service interval is every 5 years or 150,000 miles. So if you're at 100,000 miles, it probably hasn't been changed. It's a good idea to change it now. And the air filter box is right here. It's always recommended to check the air filter. You should change this about every 30,000 miles or less. Double check it, make sure it's not dirty, and replace it. And your brake fluid, it's located right here. You want to check that, make sure it's not dirty. If it's dirty, you should replace it. Use a fluid extractor, get as much of the fluid out as possible, put fresh fluid in. It should tell you what kind of fluid is on it. This one happens to be .3. And then fill that up with clean fluid, and then you're gonna bleed the brakes regularly. And the power steering fluid is located right down here underneath the alternator. So you definitely wanna check that fluid. See if it's dirty. If it's dirty, do the same thing. Fluid extractor, take the fluid out, put fresh fluid in, you should be good to go. And washer fluid. Always top off your washer fluid. And the serpentine belts. If you haven't changed them in 100,000, it's a good idea to change them. Always double check, take a look at them, see if there's any dry rot or cracking. Now, it's easily to see this belt right here, the drive belt. The other belt that's down below, the AC belt's a little harder to see. You can check that from underneath. When you're underneath the vehicle, you want to check for any leaks, any of the fluid leaking out of the differential. See if the axle seals are leaking. It looks like these are a little bit wet. There's a little bit of seepage there. So you're gonna wanna keep an eye on that in the future. Over here, check for the oil pan. The oil pan's leaking on this vehicle, so if anything's dripping on the ground, you probably wanna address it. And also the rear differential, the pinion seal, or the rear cover, or even the axle seals. Front differential, you're gonna wanna drain the fluid and put new fluid in. Rear differential, you're gonna wanna take the cover off, drain the fluid, put new fluid in. You can either do it by the cover, or if you have a fluid extractor, you can pull out the fill plug and extract the fluid that way. And the transfer case, you wanna drain the fluid, put new fluid in. And you want to do this and those differentials every 50,000 miles. You want to take a look at the shocks, see if any of them are leaking. If you see any fluid coming out of the shocks, you're going to need to replace them. If you notice a lot of bouncing when you're going down the road, it might be time that you need to replace them. And you're also going to want to rotate the tires. For the proper procedure on this vehicle, you want to take the 2 rear tires and move them straight forward, and take the 2 front tires and rotate them, crossing them to the back. Now, while you have the tires off when you're rotating them, you want to take a look at the brakes, make sure the pads look good. But also you want to take a look at the flex hoses, and you can see there is a little area where this flex hose is actually cracked. So in this case, you're going to need to replace these. And you're going to want to grease the front end. There's grease fittings right there on the inner tie rod end. There should be one on the outer tie rod end, on the lower ball joint, in the upper ball joint, the idler arm, sometimes there's a grease fitting, and also on the pitman arm. Yep, on the pitman arm. So that's what you need to do on this Chevy Silverado for 100,000 mile service. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel, ring that bell, turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our videos.